Ever get that feeling? Like some names from history, they're more like landmarks you speed past than actual people.
I know what you mean.
That's how I always felt about W.E.B. Du Bois. Like, yeah, I've seen the name on buildings and articles, but who was he really? Beyond, just a name you're supposed to know.
Right.
This deep dive, we're changing that.
And you've come to the right place for it, because Du Bois, born back in 1868, he was way more than just a name. Sociologist, historian, activist.
Wow.
A serious intellect. And he fought tirelessly for social justice in a time when doing so was seriously dangerous.
It boggles the mind a little, someone navigating all that, especially back then. What strikes me is this contrast in his early life, right? Born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
Okay, yeah.
Now, the town, for what I understand, was considered pretty tolerant for the times.
Interesting.
So you picture a somewhat sheltered upbringing, wouldn't you?
Makes you wonder about his time at Fisk University then. Pivotal moment.
Oh, absolutely. So, picture this. Young Du Bois heads south to attend college in Nashville, Tennessee.
Whoa.
And it's there he runs headfirst into Jim Crow segregation. The full force of it.
No escaping it there.
Legally enforced separation, black and white people in every aspect of life.
Permeating everything.
This wasn't some theory for Du Bois. This was his daily existence.
Exactly, and that's what makes his story so powerful.
Talk about a wake-up call, right?
Yeah.
Easy to see how an experience like that lights a fire in you.
Absolutely.
And for him, that fire, it led him to incredible academic achievements. I mean, get this. He becomes the first African-American to earn a PhD from Harvard.
Harvard in 1895, no less. That's huge.
Harvard, 1895. Unbelievable.
Groundbreaking. And he didn't stop there.
Of course not.
His dissertation, already breaking new ground, studying the slave trade. But it was his work on black communities, in Philadelphia specifically, that really turned heads.
It was so radical about it.
Du Bois, he believed in using science, hard data, to understand social problems, almost revolutionary back then. Not just observing, but analyzing, quantifying, bringing rigor to the study of racial inequality.
So he's got the academic brilliance, but he's also deeply rooted in the actual lived experiences of black Americans.
And that's key.
That combination, it's so powerful in his most famous work, The Souls of Black Folk, 1903. Even the title just grabs you.
It's evocative.
What made that book so impactful, even today?
Imagine a world constantly telling you you're incomplete, that you're defined by just a fraction of who you are.
It's heartbreaking.
That's the core of double consciousness, this idea Du Bois introduces.
Yeah.
The internal conflict of being both black and American.
Caught between two identities.
Never fully belonging to either.
It's still so relevant. The pressure to code switch, to fit in. I feel like so many people still experience this.
100%. And Du Bois put words to that over 100 years ago. That's insight.
Absolutely. But he wasn't just about identifying the problem. He wanted solutions.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting, because his vision for equality, it was very different from someone like, say, Booker T. Washington.
This is that historical debate we were talking about earlier, right?
Exactly.
Where Washington urged black Americans to focus on practical skills, economics. Essentially saying, accept segregation for now. Focus on what we can control.
Right. Gradual change. Prove your worth within the system.
But Du Bois, he vehemently disagreed.
Vehemently is the right word. He believed true equality meant dismantling the system that created the oppression in the first place.
So a much more radical stance.
Oh, absolutely. He believed in aggressively, uncompromisingly fighting for civil rights, no accepting a second-class version of freedom.
And that's where the talented 10th comes in, right? His big idea.
Exactly. Du Bois, he firmly believed that this group, the top 10%, they had an obligation, a moral duty to use their advantages, their education, to lift up the entire race.
The talented 10th, leading the charge for everyone.
Precisely. Now, of course, it wasn't without its critics. Some saw it as elitist, creating divisions within the black community itself.
Right, a valid concern. It's a complicated idea with good points on all sides, really. But you can't deny Du Bois was a man in action. I mean, he co-founds the NAACP in 1909.
Powerhouse for change. Still is.
Absolutely. And then edits the Crisis magazine on top of it all, giving black America a voice, a powerful one.
Oh, without a doubt. The Crisis became essential reading. Black writers, artists, thinkers, tackling these crucial issues. Lynching, voting rights, education.
No shying away from the tough stuff.
Not at all. And Du Bois, with that eloquence of his, that unwavering commitment to justice, it resonated.
Really inspiring how he put ideas into action.
Yeah.
But his vision, it went way beyond America, didn't it? He saw the fight for equality globally.
100%. Du Bois, he was a true believer in Pan-Africanism. The idea that people of African descent, no matter where they were, they shared a history, a struggle.
A common destiny.
Exactly. He understood colonialism's global impact, connected those dots between Black experiences in America, the Caribbean, Africa.
And he didn't just talk about it. He brought people together. Those Pan-African congresses he organized were groundbreaking.
Imagine that. Leaders, thinkers, activists, all from across the African diaspora, gathering to strategize, to present a united front against this global system of oppression.
It's amazing these congresses, they don't get talked about enough.
Mm-hmm.
They're so relevant, especially now, with the renewed interest in Pan-Africanism, connecting struggles across borders.
Totally agree. Du Bois was ahead of his time, there's no doubt. But as we get into the later part of his life, you see how his own experiences, the slow pace of change, it pushed him to some pretty radical conclusions.
This is where his thinking really takes a turn, right? We're talking mid-20th century America, the civil rights movement's gaining steam, but equality, true equality, feels so far off for so many.
Rightfully so.
And you can understand someone like Du Bois, who dedicated his life to this fight. He started to question the very systems in place.
And he did. He began to see those deep, intertwined roots of race and class, recognizing that capitalism itself,
The system itself was flawed.
inherently linked to these structures of racism and exploitation.
So not just calling for reforms anymore, he's challenging the whole foundation.
Exactly. Looking at the big picture, true liberation, he realized, required something more radical, and that's what led him to embrace socialist ideals.
Wow. A bold stance. Especially during the Cold War, when socialism was basically equated with communism. What was the reaction like?
Oh, it caused a stir. Even some of his own allies in the NAACP, an organization he helped build, they felt uneasy about this.
They probably thought he was going too far.
To an extent, yes. But remember, this was the McCarthy era. Fear and paranoia about communism were everywhere. People were being blacklisted left and right.
Just for expressing dissenting views.
Exactly. And tragically, Du Bois, at 83 years old, he found himself targeted by this system.
They went after him.
In 1951, he's formally indicted by the U.S. government, accused of being an unregistered foreign agent for his work with the Peace Information Center.
An organization advocating against nuclear weapons. They went after an 83-year-old man for advocating for peace.
It was a blatant attack, purely politically motivated. The charges were dropped eventually, but the experience left Du Bois deeply disillusioned.
Understandably so. The country he'd spent his life trying to change, turning on him like that.
It was a heartbreaking turn of events, and it makes you wonder, where do you even go from there?
I mean, it's hard to imagine, right? Facing that kind of persecution after everything,
It really is.
after a lifetime dedicated to fighting for justice, makes you wonder, where do you go from there?
Right.
For Du Bois, that where turned out to be Ghana.
Darn
In
it.
1961, he makes this huge decision, leaves the United States, relocates to this newly independent African nation.
Powerful. And, of course, invited by Ghana's president himself, Kwame Nkrumah.
Exactly. Kwame Nkrumah, a leader who championed Pan-Africanism.
It's all connected.
A concept so close to Du Bois' heart. It's like history rhyming, isn't it?
Absolutely. This wasn't just a geographical move, it was a homecoming. A chance for Du Bois to lend his brilliance, his experience, to a nation full of potential.
And he dives right in, renounces his American citizenship, becomes a citizen of Ghana, and dedicates his final years to a project he'd been dreaming of for decades, the Encyclopedia Africana.
Massive undertaking. The history, the cultures of Africa.
Trying to capture it all.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
This belief he held that knowledge, real knowledge, could combat prejudice, fight injustice.
Knowledge is power. And a powerful reminder that the pursuit of justice, it doesn't stop at any border.
No, it's a global fight.
Du Bois' story, it's amazing, right? From those early encounters with segregation to embracing Pan-Africanism, even socialism.
His thinking constantly evolving.
A willingness to challenge not just the status quo, but his own assumptions along the way.
It's a lot. But it makes me wonder, why should we, here in the 21st century, still care so much about a man born over 150 years ago? What makes him relevant now?
It's the question, isn't it? And the answer. I think it's the staying power of his ideas. Du Bois, he gave us this framework, a way to understand race, class, power. These issues, they're still so intertwined today.
Intertwined. and often really uncomfortable to talk about. It's like he
Ugh.
gave us the language for it, like double consciousness, right?
Exactly.
It's not just some theory, it's lived experience for so many people, even now.
That feeling of navigating multiple identities, like you have to choose.
Yeah.
Never quite whole. It's timeless, sadly.
It reminds you this fight for social justice, it's not abstract.
Not at all.
It's about real people, real lives, being impacted every day.
Yeah.
And Du Bois, he lived that fight, showed us the power of using your voice, your mind, to challenge what's wrong, even when it's hard, when it feels impossible.
That's his legacy right there, that call to action. Progress takes constant work, critical thinking, challenging the status quo even when it's uncomfortable.
Don't just accept things as they are.
Look deeper. Connect the dots between the past and the present. Never stop pushing for a better world.
So where does that leave us after this deep dive into W.E.B. Du Bois?
With a challenge, a responsibility even, to continue what he started, educate ourselves, have those hard conversations.
Amplify voices that need to be heard.
Exactly. And never shy away from calling out injustice, wherever we see it.
Because a more just world,
Yeah.
that's an ongoing project, and we all have a role to play. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What will your contribution be? How will you, inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois, help build that better tomorrow?